Okay, so I am a firm believer in teaching a few things well, as opposed to teaching a bunch of things not so well. So in this session, what we're going to do is rehash a lot of what we just talked about, but it's going to be you guys that are coming up with the questions. I'll come up with the objections. Maybe if we have time, then we'll go through some objections that you personally have heard. But you guys are going to be coming up with the questions. So let's quickly rehash what we talked about. There were three big things that, in terms of questions, that we talked about. So what are we trying to identify when we're in conversation? What are our questions intended to target? Okay, clarification. That is the very first thing that our questions are intended to identify, right? We want to clarify what the other person believes. Right, and so if we're being, concise, then we could just say evidence or reasons, those kinds of things. Okay, so we want clarifications, we want evidence, and then the other thing, a little bit more ambiguous.
Why do you feel that way, or what leads you to believe that way?
Okay, what leads you to believe that way, and what category would that fall under? Evidence, right? So clarification, evidence, and then there was the third kind of questioning. What was that intended to do?
Just like clarifying their understanding of the evidence.
Okay, yes, that's kind of built in to the other ones where we're making sure that we understand what they're saying, right? Setting up a target, okay? That's the third. So, clarification, evidence, and setting up a target. Those are the three things. That's the only three things you need to be thinking about when you're having a conversation. Clarifying, evidence, setting up a target. Okay, so let's start with the first one. I'm going to give an objection, and then we're just going to talk about it, okay? The early church did not even teach that Jesus was divine. That was a doctrine that was invented and then added 300 years later at the Council of Nicaea, back in 325 AD. Okay, so here's the objection. And just so you know, any of you familiar with Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code? That's where this is coming from, okay? So Dan Brown in the Da Vinci Code says that Jesus' divinity was not a matter of church doctrine. It came down to a vote. That was Jesus' divinity. It was the result of a vote, and a relatively close one at that. That's Dan Brown, okay? So, the early church didn't believe that Jesus was divine. They invented the doctrine, and then it was affirmed at the Council of Nicaea, 325, and then inserted into the Bibles that you have in your hands today. All right, what do we do?
So you can ask him, let me see if I'm understanding what you said. You're saying that the early church was started at the Council of Nicaea.
Right, yeah, so I'm not saying that the early church was started at the Council of Nicaea. I'm saying that the church had been going, right, since, first century, but that the church didn't teach that Jesus was divine. They kind of came up with that and then put it to a vote, and it weighed this way, and so it decided to include the doctrine of Jesus' divinity in our modern Bibles.
So you're saying that
you got the information.
Go ahead. Okay. So you're saying that the divinity of Jesus is not an original teaching of the church?
That's right. Yes.
So what documents have you read that gave you that information, that the Council of Nicaea is the origin of this teaching?
Okay, very good. So what did he just do?
He targeted.
Asked for evidence.
He asked for evidence, right? He didn't rush in to refute my claim. He stopped and asked for evidence, right? Now, here's something that is often the case, right, where people are just repeating. Because ask that question genuinely, I'd be like, I don't know, right? So if they're just repeating, then at that point, you're golden, right? But what you can do is sometimes you don't even really need to know how to refute it or to know specifically what's wrong with it. what you can do is just try to tease out exactly how this would work, right? So what you could do is just keep asking for clarification on exactly what my view is, okay? So let's think about this together. What would this objection entail logistically? Let's just brainstorm. If you're faced with this objection, you have all the time in the world. How is it that you would spell out exactly how this objection would work?
Either Jesus is divine or he's not. That's what really the question is from his standpoint.
Right. He is wondering whether or not Jesus was divine, and he would be saying that Jesus was not divine and that it was just invented.
Yes, he is. So what has to happen is he either has to prove his case that he isn't.
Not necessarily, because his claim is that the church invented the doctrine. So he wouldn't have to prove that Jesus wasn't divine. He would just have to prove that the church invented the doctrine.
The question to ask him is, why does he think that?
Correct. And that is the right direction to go. But I'm saying that we could dive down into the clarification element a little bit deeper before we go to the evidence aspect.
So in restating his question, or his statement, when he was saying that about it not existing, Jesus' divinity not being established until the Council of Nicene, say like, well, are there documents that precede the Council of Nicene that speak to Jesus' divinity? And obviously I'm referring to the Old Testament, which certainly gives evidence to Jesus being divine.
Right, okay.
Messiah being divine.
And so which step would that be?
Target setting.
That would be true, yeah.
Target setting, right? Or evidence, right? Because you're asking him if he's read some documents, so that kind of doubles as both. But I'm saying we can drill down on clarification, right? Here's the objection. Jesus' divinity was not a doctrine that was originally taught by the church. It was added at the Council of Nicaea, 325 AD.
So you would just say, so you're saying that there is, so if I understand you correctly, for clarification, if I understand you correctly, you are saying that there is no document prior to the Council of Nicene which discusses or establishes the divinity of Jesus Christ.
Well, there may be other documents that talked about it, but like I said, it would have been debated. It wasn't like a doctrine that was taught universally as orthodoxy. Like there had to be some debate in order for like the council to have to talk about it. But it was only at the Council of Nicaea that became the official church position.
So in diving deeper for clarification, that would mean that somebody had to kind of invent this idea, which is not something that, if people are prone to look for scientific evidence, who got the bright idea that this man is God and a man? Like their clarification questions would drive them to understand somebody had to be on something to come up with an idea like that. Like, where did that idea originate if it wasn't the fact of the matter?
Right.
Who got the idea? How did it get propagated so heavily? They would have to then start thinking through those steps of, okay, how did this come to be then?
Mm-hmm. Now, okay, so let's think about it. What part of the process is that? Target setting, right?
So I guess you just have to say something like, I know you're focusing on clarification, so maybe it's just focusing in on the Council of Nicene. Say, if I understand you correctly, the divinity of Jesus Christ was not formally recognized until the Council of Nicene.
That's correct.
That's
yes.
a clarification statement.
Yes.
Right.
So right now you're just clarifying what I said. You're repeating back, right? Demonstrating your understanding. What's our model? Here's the reason that I go through this. Because we really don't like the clarification stage. We really don't like it. We want to get right to the refutation, okay? That's why I'm slowing us down here, okay? So what's our model question in that first stage?
What do you mean by?
Right. What do you mean by that? Okay? So let's try to use that model question. Here's my objection. The doctrine of Jesus' divinity was not originally taught by the early church. It was added at the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD?
Well, what do you mean by Jesus' divinity?
Good question. I would mean the belief that Jesus is like equal to God. So in Judaism you have God the Father. Well, the church invented this idea that Jesus was on par with God the Father.
Okay, I'm really simple, and I'm lost in all this. So what was it that the church was teaching about Jesus in the first century?
Well, I mean, some of them would have believed that he was just kind of a good teacher. Some of them would have believed that he was the Messiah, but even the Messiah in the Old Testament isn't a divine figure. And then some of them would have believed, eventually that he came to occupy this divine status. So that was kind of like, there was a variety of views, and it just so happened that Jesus' divinity happened to be the most popular one that won out in the end.
So if you said that the Messiah in the Old Testament, what do you mean by that? What did they in the Old Testament perceive as being the Messiah?
Right, so in the Old Testament, when they thought of Messiah, even Second Temple Judaism, when they thought of Messiah, they thought of this kind of like military leader that would come, wipe out the Romans, and establish the Jewish state as like the central hub for all geopolitical activity. All the Jews would come back, and they would just kind of like be paradise. That was kind of the idea of Messiah.
Well, basically, all the testimony of the apostles who were with Christ during that time, they remarked about him relating to God as his Father and him being the Son. There were comments about the Holy Spirit. And I think come 300 AD, they just put it together. Yeah, maybe they weren't specifically preaching that he was divine, but 300 AD, they made it legit. They documented it.
Okay. So remember how I said we don't like clarification,
Okay.
right? Notice, and I'm not trying to call you out or anything, but notice how hard this is. How many questions were in there? Almost none, right? And it wasn't even to get more information or evidence or anything. It was to make her point, right? That's where we want to rush to. Okay. What's our model question? What do you mean by that? Okay. Here's the objection, and I'm gonna give you a little bit of help here. Okay. The doctrine of Jesus' divinity was not originally taught by the early church. It was added at the Council of Nicaea, 325 AD.
What do you mean by add?
Right there. Okay. What do you mean? Right. Okay. So think about it. That word added, what has to happen for the doctrine to be added to the Christian Bible?
It has to be
300 years after Jesus lived.
that it wasn't there before.
Right. So, what's the question that we should ask? That's a little confusing to me. When you say that the doctrine was added, what are you referring to? Okay? So now the skeptic is forced to really think through this, right? Oh, what do I mean by added? Okay, so let me throw something out here, and we'll go from there. Okay, so what do you mean by added? Oh, well, so before the Bible, Jesus' divinity wasn't taught, and then the council got together and decided that doctrine should be added into the Bible.
So does that mean that we have documents that were before that don't have those divine statements in it?
Okay, good question. But how much more clarification did I give you in my answer? That much. See, and even though I gave you no new information, you wanted to move from clarification to refutation. Right? This is hard. It's a totally different way of thinking, but we've got to get used to it. Okay? So, I said the doctrine was added. You say, what do you mean by added? What did I come back with? Oh, I mean added. So what's your next question?
What did you mean by add?
Right, and again, don't make it sound like I'm doing a bad job explaining myself, right? Put it on you. So come up with a kind of self-deprecating question that you could ask.
Where did you come to that conclusion?
Okay, what step would that be, though?
I can't sit there and
That's why I'm doing it,
Right
though.
now, I'm gonna have you refute or prove what you're gonna say just by saying, okay, show me the evidence.
I'd say, when you say add it to what?
Very good. Okay, so there again, you're asking what I mean, right? Okay, so I would say, yes, like I mean added to like the Gospels where it's talking about that, to Paul's letters, and like the other letters written by other people, like those specific things. That's what I'm talking about when I'm saying added.
So you're talking about, so I mean, there it's really, they've really pinned themselves in the corner right there, because then there's, because they clearly don't know about canon. You can say, well, are you talking about the canon? When you say added, are you talking about the canon? And they're going to be completely, most likely.
Right.
I mean, out of slits right there.
Right. So now we've asked the question, because that idea of something being added, that's the linchpin of this whole thing, right? So that's where you need the clarification. So his view is that some doctrine, like Jesus' divinity, was inserted to the Gospels, to Paul's letters, the other, like all 27 books of the New Testament. That doctrine was inserted in 325, okay? So now what you can do is ask your clarifying question, or like try to understand if you're on the same page. So now you can say, okay, if I understand you correctly, your position is that in 325, the church got like all of the Bibles that were in existence, got them all together, and like inserted the doctrines into them, or like maybe copied new ones that had the doctrine in it, and then burned the old ones, and then like redistributed it, and no one cared. Right? So you're just trying to understand their view, and it seems like their view is that they went to the far corners of the Roman Empire, gathered all the scripture in one place, changed it or just made new ones and burned the old ones, redistributed, and we have no evidence of that? Is that your view? It didn't require you to refute anything. It just took you explaining what their view was by understanding it. Right? Now, you could go the refutation route, right? And ask for the evidence. Like, what evidence convinced you of that? You could do that. I'm not saying that that's illegitimate. But I wanted to stick on clarification because I knew it would be really hard. Okay? So, the early church didn't have this doctrine. They added. What do you mean by added? Well, they took all the Bibles and maybe you could even ask that question. It's like, so like, when you say added, do you mean like they just like wrote over the words that were already there? Or did they like make new ones and then burn the old ones? Right? That's another clarification one. What do you mean by added? Okay, well, now they got to think through that. It's like, oh, well, it's not like you've got a word processor and you can just put the cursor there. And it's like, okay, so what do I mean? Well, I guess you can't really just like insert text into the document, so I guess I believe that they just made new documents and burned the old ones. And it's like, interesting. So if I'm understanding you correctly, you think that the Council of Nicaea got all the Bibles together, made new ones, and burned the old ones, and then redistributed them. All you're doing is trying to understand their view. And when you spell it out, it starts to become impossible. How long did it take to hand copy the Gospel of Luke? More than the Council of Nicaea. And they've got more than just Luke, right? They've got more than one Luke. So, just clarification, you didn't even have to move to the next step. I want you to focus on clarification. That's a critical step. You need to ask genuine questions in order to understand. It's a key step here. So, before we move on, any additional things you guys want to throw out?
I'm just curious, like,
Yeah.
when you get to the point where he's like, okay, it was added at the Council of Nicaea, like, my brain wants to go, well, what would be the purpose of adding the divinity at that point, when up until that point, according to your according to your sources or whatever it is, there was no need for it.
Right, yeah.
I'm just curious as to why.
You could go the why route, and they would probably say, well, there was a contingent of people that believed that Jesus was divine. There was a contingent of people that believed that he was the Messiah. There was a contingent of people that believed that he came in the flesh and not the spirit, that he came in the spirit and not the flesh. There were all of these different contingents, and then it just so happened that this group became more popular and was codified at Nicaea. And so that would give you more information. But the real critical issue is, what do you mean by added? Like, how does that work? How does added work? So that just kind of demonstrates the importance of trying to get to exactly what they believe. Exactly what they believe. And if you can get to exactly what they believe, 90% of your problems are gone. Okay, let's switch here. Did you...
I was going to say another preemptive question you could ask is, so you're saying affirmatively the New Testament does teach the divinity of Jesus, leading up to the whole, did they collect all the Bibles and burn them thing?
Right. Yeah, you could do that. And that would be what? What stage would that be?
The arrow targeting.
Right, setting up a target, right? So you know where you want to get them, and so you set the stage so that they hit the target, and then you move forward from there. Yes?
Like with the whole abortion thing, 18 days is when scientifically they can sense there's a heartbeat. From conception to heartbeat. So with those 18 days, those cells are multiplying up to that heartbeat. What do we have? A heartbeat. That makes us what? A person. It might be in the oven, as I always call it, but it's still a heartbeat. Makes it therefore a person. It's just not living on the outside of the world right now.
Okay, now, if I understand you correctly, you're saying that having a heartbeat makes you a person. Okay. Wouldn't it be the case that my cat has a heartbeat?
It still makes, it's not a human, it's an animal.
Okay, so let me just back up and clarify.
No, but I'm just, for someone who's like opposed to it and not like getting them on your side, but trying to maybe get them a little more understanding on how you might feel about it, or just giving them something to think about and maybe realize, oh, okay.
Right, but I think this highlights the importance of having our own views sorted out beforehand.
Mm.
Let's say that...
But yeah, you are right. It does, but I'm talking about like human, like a person.
Right, so let's talk about humans. There's a person laying on a hospital bed, goes into cardiac arrest. Heart's not beating. Do we have an obligation to save them?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not a person.
Yes, they are.
No, their heart stopped beating. They no longer have a beating heart, right? So they're no longer a person. A heartbeat doesn't make you a person, right? And so we don't want to make that argument. So we need to make sure that we're being careful about the kinds of arguments that we're making. Otherwise, it's going to go badly for us. Love to explore that more. Let's keep plugging along, and then if we have time, we'll maybe explore abortion a little bit more and see how we could work through that with some questions. We've gone through clarifying. Now we'll get to where everyone wants to go, right? The evidence, all right? So, here's your objection. The only rational explanation for how we got here is evolution. You can believe in creation if you want, but that's all based on your faith in the Bible. Evolution, only rational explanation. Creation is just blind faith in the Bible.
What do you mean by evolution?
Okay, evolution, I would mean like the process by which genes experience mutations, and then that creates different kind of like expressions of traits, and the various mutations produce different traits, and the traits that are adapted to the environment will tend to survive, and then that just accumulates over time, and you end up with really organisms that are really good at adapting to their environment, humans.
So I understand then that there are genes that came together and supported evidence, in your words, of forms, life forms. Is that correct?
Maybe I'm not exactly sure what you're saying there. Can you restate that for me?
The genes that you're talking about that came to support the evolution came together, restating the same thing, so I'm not sure what I'm saying.
That's good though. Okay, so notice when you tried to repeat back, you realize, okay, I don't actually have quite the handle on it than I thought I did, right? So imagine what would have happened if he just jumped right into refutation. What would he have done? He would have misrepresented my view. How does it feel when someone misrepresents your view? It feels disingenuous. It feels like they don't really care what you think and that they're just out to argue, right? So I'm glad that this happened because it's important that we understand before we engage.
What did you mean by a rational explanation?
Right, good question. So by rational explanation, I would mean one that can be supported with reasons and evidence.
Why do things need to be supported with reason and evidence?
Well, I think that the reason you need to have that is because if you don't have reasons and evidence, then it seems like your beliefs would be irrational and pretty much anything would be up fair game. Like anyone could believe anything if you don't need reasons and evidence.
How do you find your evidence?
Okay, yeah. So I would probably define that like in terms of like lab experiments. Those would be like super high quality pieces of evidence. Experiments that can be repeatable. Like that would be really good if we had that kind of evidence.
So you said evolution is the building of genes and traits and stuff, correct?
Yeah, so I said that your DNA mutates, and those mutations produce different expressions, like traits, and the traits that are produced by those mutations will either be better or worse at adapting to the environment, and the ones that are better just tend to accumulate.
So if your belief is that it's built off of DNA, where do you think that first one came
The first one? First set of DNA?
Yeah.
Okay. There, I wouldn't know for sure. Evolution really doesn't deal with like the origin of life absolutely. It just kind of deals with once life gets going, how do we end up with this and get to that?
I don't know what you mean by rational reasons.
Okay, rational reasons, I would be, it'd be like, you would want an argument that given A and B together lead to C. So like a rational argument would be, man is mortal, Socrates is man, therefore Socrates is mortal. Something like that. So that would be like a rational reason.
So what would be the rational reasons for evolution?
Okay, what's the question she just asked?
What are the rational reasons for evolution?
Right, and what's our archetype question?
What do you mean by that?
Well, that's clarification. How did you come to that conclusion? Right? Okay, so what was my claim? My claim is that evolution is the only rational explanation. And then you guys drilled down on, okay, what do you mean by rational? And what have I given you? I've given you syllogisms. I've given you in the lab tested, repeatable experiments, right? Okay, I have just set the banquet before you. And now all you have to do is ask the question. Okay, so how is it that you came to the conclusion that evolution is the rational explanation? And your question specifically, what rational arguments convinced you that evolution is true? Okay, now what do I have to do?
You have to prove it.
Right. You don't have to disprove it. I have to prove it. And specifically, I have to prove it in a very special way. What kind of way do I have to prove it now?
Rationally.
Syllogisms, labs, repeatable experiments. What repeatable experiments have demonstrated that mutations in genes produce different traits that are therefore selected by the environment and then accumulated over time?
None.
What experiment has proved that?
None.
None. You don't have to do anything. You just have to clarify, figure out exactly what I believe, and then ask for my reasons. Right? Okay, you guys did beautifully there. Try another one. And here's one that I forgot that I had included in here. Okay. A fetus doesn't have self-awareness. So it's not a person. You think that a blob of cells is more important than real people who are already here? That's a religious claim that you accept without proof.
You jump the gun and say, how did you get here?
Indeed you could.
What do you mean by real people?
Excellent. Okay, real people. So by real people, I mean people that that actually know that they're here, that have self-awareness. That's what makes someone a real person.
What about someone who's in a coma?
Okay, so what have we done? What stage is this?
The evidence.
target.
That's target, right? So we will get there,
Okay.
but let's try to stick clarification and proof. Okay, clarification, proof. So I say a real person is someone that actually knows that they exist. A real person is someone who has self-awareness. Fetus doesn't have that. Blob of cells doesn't have that.
So self-awareness is a requirement to be a person, a personhood.
That's right.
And then we would go to evidence.
Right? Which would look like what?
How can you prove that a person is self-aware?
Well, that wouldn't necessarily be asking for evidence, because I mean, it might be a little bit tricky, but I think that's more setting a target up. Like, how can you prove that someone is self-aware? That may be problems for my view, but it's not actually asking me for reasons.
What is your evidence that a fetus is not self-aware?
Well, I mean, just the fact that it doesn't have a brain, at least in the early stages, the cortical brain activity or brain structure that's required for the complex brain process that is self-consciousness is just not in place when it comes to a early developed fetus.
So how do you define self-awareness?
Okay, this is good. So what kind of question is that? How do you define self-awareness? Claire, what do you mean by self-awareness? Right? Okay, excellent. So what I mean by self-awareness is like knowing that you exist and that you exist in an environment. So knowing that you exist and that you exist in an environment. I think if you've got those things, then you're self-aware.
So if I'm understanding your chain of logic there, then somebody with very extreme autism who does not have that awareness would then not be a person, and it would be not objectionable to end their life. Am I correct?
Okay. What stage is this?
I guess I went too far, didn't I?
Right? We're target now, okay? Telling you guys, it's hard, but really try to think in these discrete steps, okay? So we've just clarified what self-awareness is. Okay, what would be the next step?
What brought you to that conclusion?
There you go, right? So, and we can be even more specific, right? We could say, okay, so what is it that leads you to believe that self-awareness is critical for personhood? Something like that, right? Okay, well, now I've got to justify my claim, right? I now have to prove to you that self-awareness is a necessary property of persons. And that's going to be pretty hard to do.
It's kind of a sidebar, but that's something that has convinced people in the past to not be pro-abortion anymore when they realize that a fetus can sense pain. That has been something that has helped them say, oh, okay, well, it's not just self-awareness. There are other things that I recognize this fetus felt pain when this happened. That has been a component that changed their logic.
That's true, yeah. And even here, so something, now you guys did great there, right? You went clarification and proof. And that's as far as we're taking the process each time here. But we can bring in some other things just, for our own intellectual stimulation here. once you've kind of locked down the thing that they've got for personhood, well, then you can start exploring other things. Or you can say, okay, well, what about this human that doesn't have that thing, right? Like, who else lacks self-awareness? Newborns. Right? Okay, who else?
People who've gotten automobile accidents.
People who have just recently gotten automobile accidents. Brain injury. All of these people lack self-awareness. So, are they not persons? And now what do I have to do? Got to backtrack and say, okay, well, no, it's not self-awareness. It's blah. And then your question is, what do you mean by blah? And then you say, if I understand you correctly, you're saying blah. And I say, that's right. And then you say, how did you come to that conclusion? Rinse and repeat. Right? That's how this whole process works. Okay, one more. The Gospels are just a bunch of stories that were created by early Christians to get other people to join their religion. You fundamentalists just have blind faith in your own Bible stories. So Bible stories just invented to get people to join a religion, and you fundamentalists have swallowed it hook, line, and sinker.
What do you mean stories?
Excellent. Okay. So what I mean by stories, it's like Jesus walking on water, right? Like, that's crazy. That's just invented. It sounds really cool. Like, I would want to be part of a religion where my guy walks on water, right? So, like, walking on water, feeding the 5,000, miracle stories, basically. Like, all the miracles that Jesus did, they're just stories to get people to join Christianity.
What do you mean by fundamentalist?
Fundamentalists would be like the people that take it super hardcore, like they actually believe that Jesus walked on water, fed the 5,000. The people that don't believe that are going to hell. Like, that's what I mean by fundamentalist.
What do you mean by blind faith?
Blind faith would just be like, you saw it on the page, and because it's on the page, it must be true, right? So like you're reading a headline, just scrolling on Facebook, you read the headline, oh, that must be true. Blind faith. That's what I'm talking about.
What do you mean by faith?
Faith, basically, like just accepting something because someone told you.
So if I'm understanding you right, you're saying all the stories in the Bible, the Bible's just a storybook.
Predominantly, yeah, like especially the miracle claims, like I said. Miracle claims added in just as stories, yeah.
So can we then ask, how did you come to that conclusion?
Yes, beautiful. Yeah, it's the two-part process now, yes. So the question becomes, how did you come to that conclusion, right? Or what would be another variation of that question, right? Because it doesn't just have to be that one, but what could be another variation of that question?
What makes you believe that they were added in or just storybooks?
Beautiful, right? Different variation, same question. Anyone else have a variation they want to throw out there?
What evidence would you have that people just blindly accepted it the moment they read it on the page?
Okay, that's interesting. So you're targeting the fundamentalist side as opposed to the added side. So like, what evidence do I have that every Christian just accepts these things on blind faith and that they don't have good reasons for it? Right? Like, have I done a sociological study? Probably not, right? What's my sample size? So that would be another good spot to target there. And the way that you phrased it, what evidence did you have? Or you could say, what evidence convinced you that such and such was true? Right? All variations of the same question. Okay, so this here is, like, this is your bread and butter in conversations. What do you mean by that? How did you come to that conclusion? Now, it's a little bit clunky right now because you're still working through it. You're having to assimilate this. Okay? So here's what you can do. When you're reading or you're listening to people or you're in conversation with people, listen for the objections. And it doesn't just have to be religious ones, right? It can be political ones. Like, think about the political things that you encounter on a day-to-day basis. Run that through your head, okay? So maybe someone says, you can't legislate morality. That's kind of both, okay? So what let's run that through. You can't legislate morality. How many of you have heard that? Is that just a me thing?
I've said it.
Okay. I've never met this woman before. I don't. Okay, so you can't legislate morality. Okay, what's the first thing that should come to our minds?
What do you mean by legislate?
Okay,
Like,
by
what is the purpose of legislating in your mind?
okay, those are two different questions. Which one do you want to ask?
What is the purpose? What do you believe is the purpose of legislation?
I think the purpose of legislation is to set up guidelines so that people act properly.
What do you mean by guidelines?
So like making some things illegal and other things legal. Like that would be what I mean by guidelines.
Why? What would be the purpose of making something legal and something illegal in your opinion?
Right. Okay. We'll pause here. What stage is this?
Clarifying.
Target. Right? You have a place you want to take me, right? It's target. We want to be in clarification mode. Okay? We never want to skip clarification mode. Okay? So you can't legislate morality.
What do you mean by morality?
There you go. Okay? By morality, I just mean being a good person, doing the right thing, those kinds of things.
What is right, what is wrong?
What's that?
What is right, what is wrong?
Okay, so what is right, what is
Can I
wrong?
answer these questions? Because I say this all the time.
yeah, feel free, raise your hand, yeah.
So what is right and what is wrong is morality.
So
And you can't make laws concerning what is right for everybody and what is wrong for everybody. Who makes those laws?
okay, so let's think about it. So what is right and what is wrong? It seems like the thing that's right would be like behaviors. Like, for example, it would be wrong for me to just kill someone.
Well, and it's not behaviors, it's how you feel about it. You cannot make laws that tell people how to feel right or to feel wrong about.
Okay,
A
so
behavior.
notice what we've just discovered here. I said behavior, she said how you feel about the behavior. Okay, so that process of clarification, we were saying the same thing. You can't legislate morality. I don't think that's true. She thinks it is true. We're saying the same thing, but we mean different things. Never would have known that if we didn't clarify. So when I say right and wrong, I'm saying, like, not killing someone. I think that's right.
It is.
Okay? Can you legislate on not killing someone?
Yes.
Can you legislate morality? No. In that. So, hold on. Hold on, though, right? Think about it. If I define morality as a concrete example, not killing someone, can you legislate that?
Yes.
Yes. Can you legislate how someone feels about not being able to kill someone? No. So, it depends on what you mean, right? But if you're focused on behavior, let me just ask this question. Can you think of a law that is amoral? Name a law that's amoral.
There are many that have been put in place recently, otherwise Christians wouldn't be kind of up in arms. Laws, like up in Canada, they were trying to pass laws that said you have to respect a transgender person's pronoun.
Oh, okay, sorry.
But that wouldn't be amoral.
Yeah,
that would be respecting a moral position.
That makes sense.
Right, yeah, so amoral as in having nothing to do with morality.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry.
Neither good nor bad.
Right.
Yes. So can you think of a law that has nothing to say about morality?
Just the speed limit, impose the speed limits.
Okay, speed limit. Is that a moral thing? Why can't you go over the speed limit?
Because you can kill someone.
Right, and isn't killing someone
Wear a mask.
bad? It's a moral law. Right? I can't think off the top of my head of a law that has nothing to do with treating someone in a moral way.
But that's, in my mind, that's why you have laws, is because you can't make everybody think the same way about something.
Mm-hmm.
So there has to be a clarification of what is socially acceptable and what is not,
but you can't make people think a certain way about it.
Mm-hmm.
You can only say, it doesn't matter what you think about it, this is the way it's going to be.
Right, and when you say socially acceptable, what do you mean?
It is not advantageous to society to have someone going around killing somebody. It is not advantageous to society to allow people to go around stealing whatever they want.
So it would just be purely what is advantageous to society?
What promotes a healthy society,
right,
or functional society.
And would you say that morality is connected or disconnected from a healthy society?
The laws are based on mostly what comes out of the Bible, which is what we use as a standard to say this is moral, this is not moral, this is good, this is bad.
Right.
And they are based on a standard of, quote, good behavior,
mm-hmm,
of what the majority of the people have decided would be the good behavior. But you can't have a few people come up with an idea of, oh, I want it to be this way, and make everybody think that way about it.
Mm-hmm. And so I think here, right, we're working through this, and we've got a disagreement, but it seems like the disagreement is just in what we mean by moral. Like, you're talking about how people think about it. I'm talking how people treat other people. And, like, that's just the extent of it. And so to clarify really helps to draw that out and to have us not talk past each other.
It's interesting hearing the play out. What she means by morality is the desire to do good.
Exactly, yeah, like feeling about it.
Making somebody's desire to do good.
Yep.
And that's where, when we've heard Christians say that, or when Christians have said it, it comes down to, I don't want the government to make Christians. That's my job to teach them.
Right.
So that then they want to do good. Right. And then the law is not even a requirement.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an interesting, interchange.
Right. And notice, right? Like, that's how we want our conversations to go. We don't want to bulldoze over people and misinterpret what they say and, mischaracterize their views. We want to ask for clarification and then figure out what reasons they have for it. And if we happen to have some special place that we want to get them, to ask a well-positioned question, line a target up, right? So not a whole lot of time left. This will be the last one, and then we'll call it a night. Let's see. Okay. You Christians are always talking about how the universe is designed and how that proves that your God exists. Well, it's a flawed argument because there's an infinite number of universes. It's called the multiverse. And so, statistically speaking, it's actually certain that at least one universe would be life permitting where we would be able to exist. Because there's an infinite number of these universes. So, statistically, it's just actually certain that we would wind up in this exact universe. So, it doesn't prove God at all. Just learn about the multiverse.
So, what I'm understanding you're saying is that you believe that there are multiple universes, and that no matter what, there would be at least one where we exist.
Right, yeah.
Can you explain to me why you believe this?
Okay, very good. So she just moved from clarifying to what I said to asking for my reasons, right? So that's pretty good. Might want to spend a little bit more time on the clarification side, though, just to make sure that we're talking about the same thing. So we'll spend a little bit more time on clarification.
What do you mean by universe?
Okay, by universe, I mean like space-time reality. So, if space-time is connected here, that's going to be a universe. If you've got another space-time that's disconnected, that's going to be a different universe.
So you're saying that it's impossible for God or a God to be part of that equation?
Okay, what step is that?
Target.
It's target, right? Okay.
So this might be a good time to play dumb because most thing any people have heard about multiverse would be from Marvel.
Right.
I'm not a quantum physicist. Explain to me the multiverse theory because the only thing I know about it is what I've seen in Marvel movies. So could you explain the multiverse to me more fully?
Okay, so what just happened here David's now my best friend. Because he just genuinely asked me about something that I believe, right? And he's like, oh man, like you are way up here talking about the multiverse, and I am way down here, like trying to grasp at your, hem of the garment, right? And so like that makes me feel really good. Okay, so I am, oh yes, let me tell you about the multiverse, right? And then I'm going to explain it. So yeah, so it's like there's all these different kinds of universes where like the different laws of physics are changing, and like there's different beings that exist in these other ones. So like literally, there's like an infinite number of these universes. So any possibility is happening in any of those universes. Like that's the multiverse.
Who are the beings in those multiverses?
Well, I mean, I don't know exactly, but whatever kind of being you could come up with an infinite number, it's got to be in there.
So you're saying any possibility could happen in any of these multiverses.
Theoretically.
So does that mean that in one of these multiverses there could be a God that created them?
Good question. Okay. So what was that stage? Target, right? We've missed a crucial one. And the reason we love the target is because we think we already know where they're wrong, right? That's why we love the target. But we're missing the crucial step.
And then they can provide the evidence.
What led you to believe that the multiverse exists? Like seriously, I've just defined the universe, the multi-universe theory, as one space-time that is closed off from another space-time, right? If we had any evidence from the other universe, what would that make it?
Not another universe.
Part of our universe, right? Okay, so what evidence do I have for the multiverse? That much, right? And that's all it takes. And then you could probe it and say it's like, but that's interesting, right? If any possibility could happen, then wouldn't that mean that there's a universe where God exists? Right? And you wouldn't want to ask it derogatorily or smugly. You would just say, it's like, I don't know, maybe I'm missing something here. But it seems like if any possibility could happen, then wouldn't that mean that there was a universe where, like, God existed? What are they going to say? Right? They've already established that every possibility is an actuality. So you come in super meek, super humble. I'm definitely missing something. Please help me with this. But it seems like God would exist in one of these.
Yes, because you did say other beings.
Exactly. Right?
Or any possibilities.
Any possibility.
Like if there's an any part was like really big in your sentence. Like all of these options are there, but this option is definitely off the plate.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
You're in the circle again.
And how much did you guys have to know about multiverses?
Nothing.
As much as you.
As much as me. That's excellent. As much as me. Right? So that's the power of this tactic, right? But it requires you to slam those brakes. Because you'll notice, you guys really wanted to set that target up, right? But do not set the target unless you know what they mean and you know the reasons they have for believing it. Go through those two steps. Make sure you understand what they're talking about, because you don't want to be misrepresented, right? How would you like it if someone characterized Christianity as this religion where there's an angry sky daddy that had to be appeased with blood magic?
Get it all the time.
Right? We wouldn't, like, that rubs me the wrong way. That tells me that this person didn't take the time to really understand what I believed. So why am I going to talk with them?
That's why we should treat them as people rather than an opposite opinion.
Exactly. So if you want to be understood, at least extend that courtesy to others. Right? And then, next rule, no more free rides. Get them to tell you why they believe what they believe. And then, maybe, you can set up your target. Go through those first two steps. And again, don't do it to win the argument. Right? In a lot of the exchange here, you guys wanted to win the argument. You wanted to defeat the objection. But what ought we be focused on? Understanding. If you are genuinely concerned with understanding what they believe, this tactic will come a lot more naturally. But if you just want to refute them, you're going right to the target, right? Maybe you just bypass the target, you just tell them why they're wrong, right? We need to be genuinely interested in them as people and in understanding what it is that they believe. Because that's what we want for us. So let's extend that courtesy to them. Okay, you guys have been terribly patient with me. I appreciate it. Hopefully this gives us a framework to slot in the information that we will talk about later on in this seminar. So we're going to be talking about some arguments for God's existence, the resurrection, the problem of evil. This will give you a framework that you can use to deploy this information in conversation. That's everything. Thank you.